Hi, my name is Scott Thompson from Dismal Records, and I want to help explain to you how we went from this to this. Come along, it's going to be an interesting ride. So how did we make our first 7-inch? Well, I met Weather Check when the Robin Hood Hills had been asked to play a show in Biscay, Minnesota, south of Hutchinson. We were running sound and opening for the Late Season, who were having their first show, and there were 2 other bands on the bill that I had never heard of, didn't know, and they didn't tell me who was playing before the show was set up anyhow. So I went to the show just kind of like, yeah, we've done this before, whatever, set the stuff up, and Weather Check was sitting in a booth off to the side, and they actually had merch, which was weird, and we were kind of like, hey, these guys are kind of serious. And I spent some time getting to know them and spent a good amount of time talking to Monopole Joe before they went on, and he was just kind of jotting down notes, and he was kind of in this other space that I had found familiar, and I didn't see a lot of other artists that go there before they perform, but you could tell something special was about to happen. So I instantly got video. I think I watched about 30 seconds and started shooting, and got contact information from them as much as I could, and moved on from there. I never knew what we would do for work for them. This was a good 2 years before we formed the LLC, before we ever thought that we would press vinyl, even though that was the long-term goal. And after that show, I just kind of followed their social media, stayed in touch, and continued to build the label on our end. So yeah, that's how we got to know Weather Check in the first place. So like I say, after that show in Biscay, we had gone our separate ways, kind of kept in contact, and then that summer, me and my wife Kaylin decided to go to the cities for a couple of different things. I ran sound for Full Throttle Band in Biscay again, and then the next night we went and saw Weather Check at their EP2 release show at the Eagles in Minneapolis. Take a look.
I don't know who you think me for, cause I ain't playing. It's a trick, I come like I'm a sip. Take our time on what we steady dealing with. And those these fancy drinks. 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 When you lost in your own mind. When you lost in your own mind. When you lost in your own mind.
After the EP Release 2 show, I was dead set on doing something with these guys, but I really didn't know what to do. Like I say, at that point, we didn't have our label established as an LLC. We hadn't pressed anything yet. We just had a lot of hopes and dreams that we would be able to accomplish something, and I knew that these guys fit with what we were trying to do. So that fall, when I turned 32, I invited them to the house we were renting in Hancock to play kind of a punk show. So we had a couple singer-songwriters from Wilmer come down. We had Weather Check drive down. I was playing with some guys. We were calling it Being Human in Public at the time. And then Zoom closed the night out. And we got video of that as well. Take a look at that.
It's like an antidote to heal the pain. Hey, time of the lies, eye of the prize every night. Spend the toughest rap, now you have time to start joking.
We recorded that night and got video and audio of the whole show, and we eventually that winter, so a year after we met WeatherCheck, we had finally formed our LLC. We were ready to release our first compilation, Disc Mill Record Sampler Volume 1.
This is dedicated to all my drinkers out there, you know what I'm saying? Hey, pour one up for real. Storm out for the chase. Yeah, what a name. Leave that and drink. Need a vacation from the hatred and the justice. He's trying to control you like a big box 1X, 26. Breaking endless expectations. I don't know who you think we were if I ain't playing. Hey.
Disc Mill Record Sampler Volume 1 has 10 tracks of 10 different artists from West Central Minnesota all the way to Minneapolis, and the one that's in Minneapolis is WeatherCheck. So we used the recording of On the 3 for the disc that we have here, and this is available on discmillrecords.com. The compilation CD had been manufactured and released. I began looking at what the label should do next. The idea had come to me while working on the factory Flore case in Benson that vinyl probably wasn't going to be that difficult. So we ended up getting a hold of them through Messenger, just asking if they would be interested in releasing a 7-inch. They said that they would. There were certain details that they wanted to be able to control that in a traditional label setting you usually can't, but we were not looking to do business as usual as it was anyway. So even on a philosophical business aspect, we were speaking the same language through the entire process. The first step in the process of making vinyl obviously is recording the audio. So we had talked about having a couple of different options when it came to studio choices. We had been kind of debating on cost, things of that nature, and eventually it came down to they decided to have a friend that they had met down in the cities recorded at their house studio. And ultimately at that point we were really more or less just concerned about how do things get pressed in the first place. So handling the audio became their responsibility. So they got it tracked, they got it mixed, they worked on it themselves as well, and eventually they finished a digital master of the 2 songs that are featured on the 7-inch. You have Innovate on side A and Elevate on side B. So when they got that far, it was about the middle of the summer, towards the end of the summer, and they were able to at least send me what the digital master was. I'd heard the songs through some basement recordings of a show, just on a cell phone I think it was, and the songs were good, which I like all their songs, so I wasn't too concerned about that. But the digital masters were like not like anything I'd heard they recorded before. The EP 1 and 2 and the singles that they had done were great, but this was obviously a step up as far as audio quality went. So at that point, I had begun talking to Dave at Lucky Lacquers. Dave is seemingly the go-to guy when it comes to getting punk and hardcore and rock records cut. And I had originally gotten in touch with him about 6 months previous to that, just to kind of feel him out about what the process was, because I did not even understand where we were supposed to go first. I've had plenty of tracks sitting on the hard drive, but never had anything that was like ready to cut to vinyl. And so just to be able to get him on the phone and pick his brain and say, okay, this piece fits here and that piece fits there, and then okay, about how much does each step cost, and then what are we doing to get it in somebody's hands? You know, what does that require? Dave at Lucky Lacquers was really nice about making time to talk to me on the phone during my lunch breaks and fill me in on what was needed. So when the digital masters were done, I started talking to Dave about what is the process of getting you the files? How do they need to be handled? How do they need to be treated? What's the cost going to be? How do they get from you to the next step? And he was really great about baby stepping me through the entire process. So I was able to go back to WeatherCheck and say, the digital master sounds great. You guys own the masters as it is because you paid for everything and handled everything yourselves. So now we need a vinyl master. There's certain rules that you have to follow when it comes to mastering for vinyl. And I linked them some articles that I'd been reading in the event that I was going to have to handle the vinyl mastering. They felt comfortable with taking a stab at it. And Dave at Lucky Lacquers even said, if I get them and there's huge problems, I'm willing to tweak them so that the lacquer comes out good. So he was willing to help out as well. Once he received the vinyl masters, which I could audibly tell a difference listening to them through headphones and my speakers at home between the digital and the vinyl master. So I knew there was at least a difference, but whether it was going to be workable in his setting, I didn't know. And when he received them, he said, these sound great. I don't have to change anything. You guys are good to go. So essentially what Dave at Lucky Lacquers did for us was he took those vinyl mastered audio files and he played them through his system, which then goes to a lathe and actually cuts a disc. So there's a needle that cuts into a plastic disc. I wish I had the plastic disc, but as we'll find out later, they don't keep those at the pressing plants. Those are ultimately discarded because once the next piece is made, they don't need them anymore. But Dave cut the tracks into a plastic piece, from what I understand, and this lacquer was then sent to United. United Record Pressing in Nashville is one of the premier pressing plants in the United States. There used to be many more. There now aren't as many. From all the research that I had done, bang for your buck and quality at the end of the day, United seemed to be the best way to go. We were going to not only get a price that was fair, but we were also going to put a record out that WeatherCheck and ourselves would say was of good quality, and for audiophiles it was done appropriately for the analog vinyl format. So after the lacquer is cut and it's sent to the pressing plant, which in this case the audiophiles went from WeatherCheck to me to Dave at Lucky Lacquers. He cut the lacquer and then they sent it to United. Now it should be noted too, before any of this can happen, the lacquer cutter and the pressing plant have to have forms and they have to have payment for sure. The forms with the lacquer cutter were really just which songs were going on which side, making sure that your audio files are labeled properly, and that which songs go on which side is really important at that stage. The cost was about $225, and that's about as good as it gets as far as I can tell for lacquer cutting. At that, having a designated lacquer cutter outside of the pressing plant is akin to a mastering engineer and a mixing or tracking engineer. Sometimes it makes sense that a tracking engineer will mix their own files, but to master your own record when you've tracked and mixed it, it's just not best practice. More ears are better. You get a different perspective on where the issues are at and what needs to be improved versus what's good and not worth wasting time on. From what I've understood and from how this all worked out, we benefited from using a designated lacquer cutter outside of the pressing plant because he could focus specifically just on one task, and the results speak for themselves. But United also wasn't going to do any work until they had their form filled out, which that's where you're getting into your intellectual property. Who owns the tracks? They need to sign that there's permission to press these tracks to the record itself, and where they're shipped, who's paying for it, things of that nature. So we both had to actually sign the forms for United. Once those forms were received, United required a 75% deposit. I think it was about $500, and so it's 75% of that. The pressing of it, the lacquer and the pressing all together ended up costing us somewhere around $1,000 for our side of it. And we had 500 of them made, so our cost per unit was about $2. But the next step in the process after the lacquer is made and it's sent to the pressing plant is that the plates are made. Now, your lacquer cutter can make your plates, but your pressing plant is going to be using the plates. Cost for us, I think we saved about $15 by having United make the plates instead of David Lucky Lacquers. He didn't care, and we did it that way. That was just what made sense to us at the time, I guess. It turned out great, so I'm not really concerned one way or another, but maybe other people have opinions on who should make the plates, whether it's your lacquer cutter or your pressing plant. But keep in mind, when you're sending in a master CD to a CD manufacturing plant, the master disc is what's in your hands and what you're sending them. When you're cutting a record, your master audio files go through this big long process, right, of what is the master actually. So the lacquer becomes the master of the plates that are made. The first step is making what's called the mother. Now, these were actually the last thing that we were sent, but for our purposes, it makes the most sense for you guys to see the plates first before we get into the actual records themselves. So what's inside this package is the mother master plates for WeatherCheck's 7-inch. These are the first plates that are made after the record itself is cut into the lacquer. So that's the opposing side. This is the actual side that the material is on. So there's one for each side here. This one has the etching in it, so you can see that it is side B. There's DMR 004 etched into the gap in between where the media is and the center. So when you hold it into the light, probably can't see it here, but it's very clear that you can see that it says DMR 004-B, so you know it's side B. And we have side A here as well. So these are the mothers. The mothers are basically the mold that other plates can be made from. It's considered a 3-step plating process where you go lacquer, mother, and then stamper. So these are the stampers. The stampers are the actual plates that the records themselves are made from. You can press, from what I understand, up to usually 1,000 is your max on a stamper. I don't know how many copies of the stampers you could make from the mother, but I'm fairly certain that if they're kept in good condition, you can make quite a few stampers out of them. So this basically means that this audio that's on these stampers is what actually gets pressed into the vinyl itself. It's a near perfect replica of the mothers, which are, hopefully, if everything's done correctly, a near perfect representation of the lacquer itself, which was cut from the master, the vinyl masters that we sent him. So you can see which is side A and which is side B on these as well, because you can see the etching, DMR 004-B. We've got A here, and so these stampers themselves are what this record was made out of. I just want to make a couple notes before we move on to the actual records themselves, and it's that the plates and the stampers don't generally come back to the customer like they did this time. I specifically requested them so that we could do this video and give kind of a hands-on, like, this is really how this is done. I have never known anyone who's pressed vinyl before. Those people have always kind of seemed like gatekeepers to me, and I thought that it'd be really helpful for other people who would like to either press their band's records or are running independent labels that have never pressed vinyl and are kind of scared by either the cost or the process or whatever. I kind of wanted to just simplify it, and I feel like having tangible metal plates in my hands, it makes it seem like it's not so big and scary, but it's actually something that normal people can do. We're from a very rural area in west central Minnesota. This band is growing, but not huge. And I feel like pressing your first 7-inch is a very common step in a lot of the bands that I love and liked when I was growing up. And so when we finally got to the point that we accomplished this, I wanted to make sure that I was getting as much information out about the process as I could. It's just, we want to see more people making vinyl. We want to see this revival that's going on continue to grow, and we know that we can only do that by sharing information and helping others achieve the same. But yeah, the plates themselves, the mothers, they usually stay at the plant. In the event that you sell out and you want to press more, they've got them right on hand. If I want to do that now, I have to pay to ship them back. I have to hope that they're in as good a condition when they arrived here as they were when they left the plant, as well as while they're here and sent back there. But I just felt like it was necessary and overall helping the vinyl community continue to grow to do this video. So with no further ado, we'll get on to the first thing we actually received in the mail in this process, which was the test press. So now we have moved on to test presses. What is a test press? A test press is basically, they rip off a handful of copies and they send you anywhere between 2 and 5 usually. You can request as many as you want, but essentially this is what your record's very, very close to going to be like. Test presses are made quickly and there's not as much attention given to them because they're not meant to be an actual representation, but a ballpark of this is kind of where we're at with the pressing. Are you good with this? And so I didn't know that, but I've learned a lot about test presses since we got the first one. And we received 3 right off the bat, and it looked and sounded great. We knew that they wouldn't be black, and from reading the notes I actually found out that I was wrong about that because they can be black, but for our pressing, United decides to do recycled vinyl at the same price as black. So there's an upcharge for setup for color, but there's a discount for using the recycled vinyl. We like being, good recycling people. We're preppers and all that sort of stuff. So we're like, yeah, if people can reuse stuff, that's great. Plus colored vinyl is, just awesome. Like, there's nothing wrong with black vinyl. All vinyl's good, but there's something about really pretty vinyl that's just like, it's just that much better, So we talked to the band. What's your guys' preference? We don't know what color the random's going to be because it's recycled. It really could be anything. We can do straight black. If you guys want us to front the cost on a specific color, we can do that. But they'll charge you if you want to use a specific color. Black is their standard rate, and then random color is the same as black. So the band and us all agreed that we were going to roll the dice and see what color we get. So I was very happy when the test presses arrived, and it is purple. It's the test presses are a pastel purple with some pink and different kind of marbling in them. They have a plain label on them, so they don't have your name or anything on them. They're just A and B. And something interesting too that I found out about test presses is that the label won't necessarily match the media. So when we got the first test presses in the mail, I put it on and it sounded great. They're purple. Like, I was just thrilled. But the song that's supposed to be on side A, the label said side B. And I was freaking out because, of course, me being simple and whatever, I'm like, does that mean you have to cut a new lacquer? Does that mean you got to start from scratch? What's it mean? And my wife said, well, can't they just put the sticker on the other side? It's like, oh, yeah, I suppose you could. But I knew I needed to get in touch with somebody because that could be a major, right? Turns out that test press labels don't matter at all. They do them so quickly and they crank them out so fast. They're thinner. They don't use as high a quality of vinyl for test presses. They're not meant to be a finished product. They're meant to be a guesstimate, a kind of approximate of where it's at. And so I called Beth and Corinne have been the two women that I've worked with in the sales department over at United in Nashville. And they let me know a little secret about test presses that I did not know, and I'm willing to share with you guys because I hope it'll save some heartache. The etching that I was talking about, which now that we have an actual record in hand, maybe we'll be able to see it. But there's etching inside this gap right here where there's no media. And it says your catalog number as well as which side. So this etching, it says DMR 004A. But the label says test press B. So from what they told me, and it turned out to be true, if the etching matches the media on that side, life is good. If the etching doesn't match that side, then we got problems. Then we got to change some etching. We got to flip some stampers around. They have to do something then. But because our etching matched our media, it didn't matter that the test press stickers were on the wrong side. They said as long as your etching and your media is correct, the final stickers, the paper labels themselves, will be on the correct side, which ended up being true. So let's go ahead and we'll take a little sample of a test press, and then we'll move on to the actual pressing itself. So, as you can tell, which y'all don't have this and it's not out yet, so you really don't know, but I can tell you that is Elevate. Elevate is on side B, and that test pressing says side A. But because the etching on the inside of the record is DMR 004B, I knew that this was going to be just fine. So after United finished sending us the test presses, I had to give them a call and say, absolutely, test presses sound great, it looks great, moving forward, let's do this. So before they could do that, they had to receive the artwork for the paper labels that go on to the record themselves. Black and white is there. Well, you can do straight plain white and say you wanted to write on them or put a stamp on them. You could save a little bit of money doing that, but we paid to do black and white labels. The band wanted to design those, and they wanted to pay for and design the jackets. That was their contribution to creating it. So once they had that artwork and they had the test press approved, they were ready to move forward with the actual pressing itself. We received 4 things that we packaged together. And so we first designed and include in this 7-inch one exclusive Discmill Records sticker. So Kaylin Thompson, our wonderful graphic designer, designed these. They were made by Sticker Guy, and we only had 500 made, and we pressed 500 records. So the only place to get one of these is in one of these specific 7 inches. But we also wanted to, of course, it's always fun putting the logo on everything, but then too, we wanted an opportunity to share the fact that the website exists now, which after we formed the LLC, that was a big step for us, was this last fall building and launching our official website. So that was pretty cool for us, and this was a good opportunity for us to be able to show that as well. So we have Dismal Record stickers. Those came first. The other thing that we had to have a few conversations about was poly bags. So poly bags are protective plastic bags that go on the outside of the jackets. They're not necessary. They're for collectors to keep their records looking nice, and I am one, so I do. And I wanted to make sure that we were sending our records out in poly bags. We went with Square Deal for ours. We have never bought poly bags before, so we didn't really know what we were going to get. We ended up buying 600 because we wanted to make sure that if some of them broke in the packaging process, that we would have backups and not be waiting on stuff. So these are kind of a thinner plastic poly bag that we got. They're not super wide, but we also don't have this stuffed with a lot of things. There isn't an insert, stuff like that, so we knew that it would be okay. We did a stress test with these, and they tear really easy. So we won't be ordering these kind again, but the company does really fast shipping, and the prices are really good. So for us to spend another 50 cents over the course of 600 poly bags, we might be able to get ones that are a little bit more durable. But for our purposes, for this 7-inch, these were just fine. I think we spent about 40 bucks on them, and we got our 500 of these stickers made by Sticker Guy for 50 bucks or so. So we threw an extra, basically 100 bucks into the whole process, but we felt like they were finishing touches that were necessary. So yeah, with that, we can move on to the actual records themselves. So with recycled vinyl, you're basically getting the trimmings off of other pressings, and whatever's in their bin at the time is what you're going to get. So that's why they give you a discount for it, is using up stuff that's taking up space in their warehouse and doing something good with it. So when we received ours, we figured they would all be the same color or something along those lines. I actually thought they would look like the test presses, which are that pastel purple. But when I started combing through the boxes, I started noticing there's differences in here, like really clear differences. Some of them are somewhat similar, but some of them are so vastly different that we will definitely say that they're a part of the same pressing, but we know that it's worthwhile to say there actually are only 3 that are plain purple with no marbling whatsoever. So in the packaging process, we ended up splitting the entire 500 records into 6 different colors. The first is the most common. We have 330 of these, and they are a dark purple marble. They're dark purple, but many of them have different yellows, reds, blacks, some blues. It really just depends on the particular one, because they are all really unique and different. But there was 330 of them that we could group all into this same color. So this is the dark purple marble. We have the next most common one is a what we called plum. So that was a dark purple, and this has a reddish tinge to it. It's got almost looking like Crayola crayons melted on it in certain spots. There are 135 of these, I believe. And I've got the actual hard numbers that we're going to put on the website when it's done. But yeah, this one we called plum marble because it was a reddish tinge, but it still has so many of those really, really pretty marbling colors in there. So that's the second most common, is the plum marble. The third most common that we have, we decided to call grape because it's dark purple and red, like only, and almost like a red grape would be. So that made the most sense to us. Some of them almost look like thunderstorms or like lightning in with that dark purple, but you can see why we would have to say that that is its own kind of entity. It's not as dark as the dark purple. It's definitely not as red as the plum. It's its own kind of beast. And of the grape, I think there's somewhere in the ballpark of 75, maybe 125, something like that. So yeah, now we're getting into, there's 3 more and these are the much more rare ones. So there's 23, I believe, of these black marbles. So it's like so dark. I almost wanted to call it smoke or something like that. It's, I mean, to the untrained eye and to looking in a video, it's just like, oh, that looks like black. But if you look in there, there is color. When you see it in person, you can see that there's some color to it. So we called that black marble, and there are 24, 23, something like that. There's not very many of those at all. The two rarest ones are the most boring, but it's kind of cool because there's only 3 of each of them. There are 3 of these plums that are plain, completely and totally plain, not a single spot of marbling on them whatsoever. So there's 3 that are plum plain, and there are 3 that are dark purple and totally plain. There's absolutely no marking on them, no marbling, no streaks, no thunderstorms at all whatsoever. So with that, those are the 6 different colors of the WeatherCheck 7-inch. I'd like to also just take a moment to go over the artwork that we have. Ross Auger, the bass player for WeatherCheck, did the artwork for these. So the first thing that we saw were the actual paper labels themselves. So he put a 1 on side A. It's got DMR 004, the catalog number on it, and their logo on side A. And then on side B, we've got the song Elevate with the same catalog number, the number 2, and then the Discmill Records logo right there. Fancy stuff. So we saw those first because they couldn't even accept the pressing as a job at United until they had that. So that was part of the contract that we originally had to sign with WeatherCheck for United to agree to press it in the first place. So then the actual jackets themselves, they had these made, and these were the last things that showed up before we packaged them. So this is the front cover, and it's got the 1 and 2 like it has on the inside labels actually on it. And then they have the recording information, their logo, and Innovate. And then you get to flip it. It's got Elevate and the Discmill Records logo there with our nice fancy barcode that I cannot wait to scan into Discogs. But yeah, Ross did a absolutely fantastic job with the graphic design, and we couldn't be happier. I'm not sure exactly. I thought I knew how much the jackets cost to have them made this way. There's obviously different ways that you can do it. You can photocopy them at Kinko's and glue them together if you want to. There's no rhyme or reason why you have to do anything with the jackets themselves. This was just the route that the band wanted to go, and they were willing to contribute on it. So this is the jackets that we have for this particular release. But yeah, we've looked at local printing shops and how we could get them cut, and then we would do the folding and gluing ourselves. But as you'll see in the next couple of clips, once we received all these pieces, we packaged them together by hand, and folding and gluing 500 jackets on top of packing them up, it would be a full day's work, but I think it would be fun. My crew might disagree, but I'll let you be the judge.
Dave, your nice, expensive old hat is on the floor.
I know.
Best pick it up.
What do you think, Magoo? Okay. Ready to work? Me. All right, let's pack up some.
I'm gonna need to see a contract for you putting me on the internet.
$200. How about you,
I
Layton?
did not agree to this. I'd like my face blurred out.
We can probably figure that out. All right.
My
back to
voice disguised too, please.
work. Make you sound like Stephen Avery.
Yeah.
Yes. Because this is very obviously grape, and this
Oh, we're video.
is very obviously dark marble purple. See? Yes.
Yeah. You're making my job difficult.
We got a good chunk done.
Ready?
Pretty near. I'm gonna get some
Uno mas.
coffee. And what do you guys think of the process so far? Are you having fun?
Yep.
This is a lot of work, huh? But you know, it's freaking awesome. Last box, 200 to go. So that's it. That is the story pretty much from meeting Weather Check. I said 2 years ago or 3 years ago before. It was only 2 years, but regardless, it's a heck of a story to go from meeting a band and just really digging their sound to actually having, you know, from our perspective, the first piece of vinyl ever made. And thinking that we may never press vinyl, thinking that it's a big, scary process and it's a ton of money and it's only for certain people or whatever. But, you know, we're very fortunate to have just met the right band. We learned fiscal responsibility, and we just set a plan into action and just didn't let fear or anything else get in the way until it was in hand. And it's almost time to share it with you guys. So the release show, I'm gonna put the flyer on here before we call it a day, but I want to say that it's at the 331 Club in Minneapolis on March 27th, and they've got some great acts opening for them. King Brown is going to be there, which I've been watching you guys, and I'm really excited to watch King Brown. Denim Thieves is new for me, and MF Chinaski, I knew I was going to mess that up. Those are some new artists to me, but I'm just very excited to see what the night brings, get this record in some people's hands, and move on to the next pressing. So I'm planning on doing just as much of a comprehensive video as I can for every release that we've done, and the sampler video is fun that's on here if you're new to the channel. There's a review kind of vlog of Benno's CD that we pressed in the fall, and now we have this wonderful nice collection to celebrate the fact that these guys pressed their first record, Dismal Records pressed their first piece of vinyl, and yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, hey. Thanks for watching.